I'm thinking of people there that are popping in my head. It's like, oh my God, I can totally see them doing that. They're intimidated to go out there for, with rejection and what they might face, but they're not intimidated, when they interview for a job.
Did you push record?
Thanks so much for tuning in again to our second act with Paige and Silka. I'm happy to say that Frank Wiegers stayed over for another segment talking about his Seriously Seeking Soulmate program. Frank, thanks for staying over.
Thanks, Silka. It's so much fun. I love talking about this stuff.
Well, what I want to get into deeper here is a concept or an analogy, I suppose, you bring up that made so much sense to me in terms of giving people confidence to get out and make a plan, put it into action, and finding or creating their soulmate. And that is what you say is that finding a mate is like, getting a great job. Treating it as a job search. Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, yeah, actually, when you stop and think about it, that having a great marriage or relationship is the best job in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It can be the most rewarding, the most fulfilling, the most passionate, wonderful experience of all. So if you want to use the metaphor, I love the metaphor of like finding a job. So first of all, if you want to find a job and you're starting out, you say, well, what kind of work do I want to do? I mean, do I have the talent and skills to do this kind of work? So assuming that you do, then you say, okay, well then, excuse me, I need to find companies that use people that have this kind of work.
And companies, so, what's the metaphor there?
Well, you need to find a partner.
Yeah.
That matches your skill set.
Okay.
or the type of work that you desire to do. Maybe you want to have a relationship that doesn't mean, for example, if you're a woman, that doesn't mean you're a housewife. You may be a career woman and you don't want to do housework, but so you want to find a partner who will either share the chores or hire them out. And so you need to think about all that stuff, and that's part of it, is to design how you want this job to be. And does it require you to move? Does it require you to stay in a certain, I mean, do you have requirements where you might have to stay in a given location? Maybe you're taking care of elderly parents or you have children or whatever. So you got to take all that into consideration. And then of course you have to get your resume up to date. And that in the dating analogy, that means that you really have to know who you are and what you want. In the last segment, we talked about the beliefs and values. You have to know if there's some beliefs that are getting in the way of you finding a mate, some cultural mores that really are not applicable. I mean, they're not true. They just came from cultural conditioning.
So like the corporate culture, if you know what kind of corporate culture. See, I'm thinking of people there that are popping in my head. It's like, oh my God, I can totally see them doing that. They're intimidated to go out there for, with rejection and what they might face, but they're not intimidated, when they interview for a job. So it's almost like changing your mindset to something that you're so familiar with and applying it to finding a mate. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
back to you.
That's exactly right. And by polishing up your resume, for example, you can say, oh, wow, I did this. I've got these accomplishments. I'm a pretty good match, so
Candidate.
Then that's exactly right. So that gives you the confidence to go out there. And when you go on the job interview, you can say, here's who I am. Here's what I can do. And of course, then the company wants to know, well, you go to the interview, excuse me, and then you put on nice clothes and, get your...
Dress the part.
Dress the part, yeah. So you go looking nice and you put on your game face and you get out there and you do it. And so that's kind of like going on a date. And then if you get a call back, then that's when it gets really interesting because they want to know if you can do the job for them and you want to know if you can work in their corporate culture. I mean, you mentioned corporate culture. Is it casual or is it corporate? Is it, do they have human resources? What kind of vacation plan, health plan, all that stuff? And see, that all dates to, and how are the people that you would be working with? Well, in the dating analogy, that's the friends and the family. You want to meet their friends and you want to meet their family, and how do they interact with that? How do they interact with the wait staff in the restaurant when you go out to dinner? All that stuff all piles into how's your corporate culture. So then you get the call back, and then you want to know what's going on, and it really takes more than one interview.
Yeah.
So then you decide then you start negotiating over salary and all that other stuff. So it's really kind of a really good analogy for the whole dating process. And if you kind of look at it that way, say, well, maybe I want to interview with a couple other companies.
Keep dating, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so you go looking around, and that's just kind of the idea. I thought it was kind of a fun analogy.
Well, it's not just fun. You can actually, with a little bit of sense of humor, you can almost approach a first date like that and talk about that. It's almost like, I got this bit of advice from this, really cool guy, Frank Wiegers. He said I should put, that could be a fun icebreaker, a conversation. It's something you can laugh at. I mean, have you told people that?
Well, no, I never have. That's a good idea.
There's a tip from me.
That's right. Silka said.
People have, I find that sometimes, people aren't natural socialites. Or, it is that those first conversations are difficult. So if you have something else that you can talk about and get to where you really want to get to, why not?
Yeah. And I think the same thing on a job interview. The idea is, of course, you talk about the job, so you've got something there to talk about. But then most of the interviewers want to know about your background and where you come from and your family and what your hobbies are and what you like to do. They want to know what kind of a person are they dealing with here. So it's the same thing.
Yeah. Well, and what comes to mind there, what people tell you in job interviews, is to ask questions about the company as well.
And that's so good because I always tell guys, I say, if you want to get a woman interested in you, you have to be interested in her and ask her questions about herself.
No, I do. I love that analogy. And this is something that you teach in the Seriously.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's all part of the action plan. I mean, there's all kinds of tips and strategies and do's and don'ts and things that you do when you're actually out there. After you've done all the work to prepare yourself so you know what you want and who you are, you have the conviction and confidence, then you get into the focused action part. And that's where, here's some dating strategies, here's the things to ask. And I actually have a whole list that I got from the New York Times actually on questions to ask your potential partner to develop intimacy. So there's the whole thing on creating the soulmate is that you have to test that person to see if it's really there. If you don't do the test, then boy, you could be leaving yourself wide open for something that doesn't work out. And we don't like that.
No. Well, Frank, I can't wait till the program comes out. I'm happy to recommend it. You're always so full of good advice. Of course, you bring so much experience to this. And frankly, somebody, my age, and I'm about to be 60, and I would find it difficult at this point in my life to take advice from somebody much younger than me. I'm sorry. I want to talk to somebody that's actually gone through this. And that's one reason why I so, happily recommend you in counseling others, because you bring that experience to the table. And of course, we will link to your information to the new site, seriouslyseekingsoulmate.com. Will be in the video description. Frank, is there anything that you want to add on this segment before we go on to our next one?
Well, yes. And the key again is take action. If you polish up your resume and figure out where you want to go look and get out there and start looking.
Well, and if the whole concept of turning this into a job search makes more sense and gives you that confidence, go out there and do it like Frank said. We'll see you next time on Our Second Act with Paige and Silka. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already done so, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. Button's right over here. And for more information on finding love again after 50, please visit our website, secondact.tv. See you soon. Bye-bye.